Today I'm using Shimmer Relief Paste in two different ways. Hello there, Michelle Short here with Terrific Tags with Michelle. I'm here on the Altenew YouTube channel on the first and third Saturday of the month. So if you enjoy my videos, I'd love for you to subscribe. So let's get started. For my focal point today, I'm using the Delicate Magnolia layering die set. This is a really pretty flower. You just get the one flower in this set, and it's got 3 layers and some also extra little bits for the edge of the petals and 2 pieces for the flower center. I'm going to cut these from some Classic Crest 110 solar white cardstock. So I'm going to bring in some low tack tape to hold those dies down, and then I can run that through my die cutting machine. I am going to cut this twice so that I've got 2 flowers for my card today. I can then remove that die and pop out all of the pieces. And I can just bring in my perfect picker here just to help me pop out all of these little pieces. So this is a really easy one to layer up. Like I said, it hasn't got many layers at all, but it's really very pretty. So I have placed the pieces onto my sticky mat, and now I can add some ink blending on top with a mini blending brush. I'm starting off with the Enchanted Garden Fresh Dye Ink collection. Now I know what you're thinking, magnolias are not purple, and I absolutely agree with you. I am a person who thinks that you can use any colour on any flower that you want. That's the great thing about card making. You can change up how you like. I do often tend to try and use the correct kind of colour on the flowers if possible. I do really love purple flowers, but in this instance I'm actually using the purples because I want it to match the Shimmer Relief Paste that I'm using in the background, and I'm using the new amethyst colour. Now, does it matter that they match? No, not really, because I can absolutely do like pink or white magnolias and have a purple background. That's not a problem at all, but I just happen to want it to match in this instance. So I've gone in with the 3 lightest shades of the Enchanted Garden Fresh Dye Ink collection. These are more of a cool toned purple, and now instead of using the darkest shade, I'm going in with the darkest shade from the Shades of Purple collection, which is Midnight Violet. And the Shades of Purple collection are a little bit more of a red toned purple, and so I'm using a micro blending brush here, and although I am adding it into some of the darker areas, I'm also going up the sides of some of the petals just to add a little bit of kind of like two-tone here. This does tend to happen in nature, and I often forget to do it on my flowers, but it's really nice having kind of some variations of colour on these petals. For the kind of little bits that fold up of the petals, I just kept them the lightest shade of the Enchanted Garden collection. I can now go in with the Golden Sunset Fresh Dye inks for the flower middles. And the piece that has got the cutout, so like the keyhole system, I don't really need to add ink blending to these because they're going to get covered up, but just in case I don't layer them up perfectly, I do like to add a little bit of ink blending on top. So just going in with the 2 lightest shades of those yellows. I did set them aside to dry for a couple of minutes, and now I can assemble the flowers. And this flower here has got the keyhole system, which is absolutely amazing. I think it's such a genius way to know how to layer up these petals. You absolutely can use the back of the packaging, but because they've got that little keyhole system there, in this instance it's the shape of an arrow. So you just want to line them up one on top of each other, and you know that that is going to be in the perfect place to create this flower. If you do get it slightly off, it doesn't seem to matter at all, but it's pretty easy to try and layer them up perfectly. I do find sometimes that I do have to lean right over to make sure that they are lined up. Obviously, that's really difficult for me to do when I'm filming because you really don't want to see the back of my head. So what I've done here is I've added a piece of the scrap paper behind it, the cardstock that I used to cut these out from. And I've got a little bit more of a contrast here, so it's a little bit easier for me to see where that actual keyhole is. And so I think I'm going to do this in the future. I found it really very helpful. Sometimes with these tiny little areas, it's a little bit difficult for me to see on my craft mat, but just bringing in that white cardstock did help me out a lot. So I've got those flower centres there, and now I can add in these little pieces where the petals kind of fold up on themselves. On the packaging, it does show these being a dark colour, and I did do that for my release cards and I really liked it. But for today, I thought I would do them the lightest shade, and I also really like them. So it's quite nice just to change up how you make these flowers sometimes. So just adding tiny little bits of liquid glue onto these, and then using my tweezers there to help me get them in place. I did add a little bit too much glue onto this piece, so it does ooze out a little bit, but I'm going to use my tweezers and my fingers just to try and remove that glue. It does tend to dry quite clear, which is nice. So I did the exact same thing for the other flower using that keyhole system. And now I wanted to add a little bit of dimension onto these flowers just so that they don't look completely flat. I do tend to sort of lift up the edges of these petals with my fingers. Sometimes I like to use something round, like I'm using the Perfect Picker here. And that does tend to kind of curve them really nicely. But I do find sometimes that that is an easier way to do it with individual layers rather than when it's all kind of formed together. So I'm just going to go in with the other flower with my fingers. It just helps them not to be so flat. So I'm going to set those aside while I work on my card base. And I want to create a tag shaped card today. I really love creating shaped card bases. And as kind of shaped card bases go, a tag one is really quick and easy to make. So I'm using the lines on my grid mat here as well as my T-square ruler to just draw some lines where I think I want to cut off the corner. So I've got the two marks there with my pencil. I can add my card base into my guillotine here and just lining up the blade with those pencil marks. And then I can cut off that corner. Now I am going to struggle a little bit with this guillotine. It does cut perfectly, but usually I stand up when I'm using my guillotine, and I was sitting down on this occasion and I found it really difficult. So I know in future I need to stand back up to use it. What I'm going to do here is take that corner that I've cut off and use it as a template. I need to make sure that it's the right way round. It wasn't to start with. I've now figured out that this is the right way round. So I can draw a pencil mark on the edge where that piece is, and then I can make sure that when I cut this piece it's going to be symmetrical to the other side. It's a really quick and easy way to create a tag shaped card. So now I can place that in my guillotine, and I am just going to make it so that the corner is slightly smaller than that pencil mark, just so that it kind of matches that other corner. And I really love the tag shaped card. Like I say, it's really quick and easy to make. And then I can just use my eraser here to remove those pencil marks. I can place it down onto my sticky mat. And then I'm going to bring in my flowers here so that I can see where I want them to be placed, so that I can use them as a guide for where I want to add my stenciling on top. I'm going to bring in the brick wall stencil from the Craft Your Life Project Kit Flower Arch. I did use this a couple of videos ago, so I apologise for using the same stencil. You can actually use any stencil here, but I do really like this brick wall. I think it works really nicely with flowers, but something like the trellis or any other type of pattern would also work really nicely. I just happen to really love this brick wall. So I'm just lining it up here so that you just see a little bit on the edges of these flowers. You're not going to see it a huge amount, but I just thought it would be quite nice kind of having it peeking out from the sides of the flowers. So I've kind of pressed that down onto the sticky mat, but because most of it is overlapping that card base, I do just bring in some memo tape just to make sure that I'm holding that down. I can then bring back in the flowers just to make sure that that's in place. And now I can open up my Shimmer Relief Paste in the new amethyst colour. And doesn't it look absolutely beautiful? I absolutely love these pastes, and I'm really glad that they've brought out some more colours. So this is the amethyst, really pretty purple shade. So I can add a little bit of this onto my sticky mat here, and you really don't need a lot of paste for this technique, which is really nice. I can then bring in my sponge dauber, and I'm going to use this to apply the paste. So you can apply it in so many different ways, but I wanted it to kind of fade off on the edges, and I found the best way to do that is with a sponge. So I'm just picking some of that up onto the sponge and removing any excess. I want to go in really lightly to start with. Again, I'm bringing back those flowers. I'm a very visual person, so I want to make sure exactly how far up or down I actually want to add the paste on this stencil. So I'm going in with a very light hand to start with, just kind of pouncing that on, and you're going to see it instantly because I'm doing it over black card. If I was doing it over white cardstock, it would take a little while to show up with this technique. It does still work really nicely, but I think on darker card bases, it tends to work even better for this kind of sponging technique. Once I've got a light layer down, I'm going back in and adding multiple layers. I want it to be a little bit more... I can't think of the word, not saturated, but you know what I mean. I want a heavier hand closer to where the flowers are and then fade out on the edges. So I'm pretty happy with how that looks. So I can remove the stencil and then I can add that onto the other part of the flowers. So I want to add some brick wall on the top left hand corner and then the bottom right hand corner. I'm just figuring out here what part of the stencil is best to use for this part. And I decided to just flip the stencil over and just use the same part that I did. I completely forgot at this point that I've got that paste there in the top left hand corner of my mat. So I squished it down a little bit. Actually, it wasn't too bad. It didn't make as much mess as it could have done. So I'm picking up that paste with the sponge, and now I just need to remove any excess paste so that I don't get too much on my card here. And then again, I can go in with a lighter touch to start with, make sure that it's in the right place, bring back those flowers to make sure that it is in the right place, and then I can start layering that up again. And like I say, you're not going to see a huge amount of it, but it is really nice. I think this brick wall in particular works really nicely with flowers. Kind of like the flowers are sort of growing up against a wall. Isn't that really pretty? Well, I think it's really pretty anyway. I do want to step it up a little bit and add a little bit of splatter as well. So I'm adding some water onto my sticky mat here, and I'm going to mix it in with the rest of the paste that's on my mat. And it does take a little while to combine the two together. I have got a few lumps of paste here, and I've got a little bit on my brush, and I was worried that if I splatter this onto the card that I'm going to kind of get a lump of the paste. So I'm trying to sort of remove that here from my brush as best as possible, and then I can just mix this in. And this is a great way to use this paste, kind of like a liquid watercolour. Really very pretty. But what I'm going to do is I'm just going to splatter it onto my card. Now this is not only going to give me a little bit more shimmer, but it's also going to break up that wall a little bit. It looks a little bit square at this point. So when I add the splatter on, I'm trying to focus the splatter where the brick wall is. Now splatter is, for me at least, a little bit difficult to control. So some of it went in areas that I wasn't necessarily expecting it to, but I still really liked the end result. Now at this point on camera, it does look a little bit more like silver paste rather than purple. In real life it does have that purple tinge to it, but because I'm doing it over a darker card base, you do automatically see more of that mica rather than the colour of the actual paste, but I do think it still looks really pretty. So this dries really very quickly, this paste, but it does also clean really easily as well. So in between this part I did go off and clean my mat and my stencil, and now I can bring in some foliage to go with the flowers. If you watched my last video, you will know that these leaves are from the Zero Waste Berries and Branches die. I've just got a couple left and I really wanted to use them up. So although they look a little bit small in comparison to the flowers, I do think they still work really nicely. Because a lot of these leaf pieces are going to get kind of pushed underneath the flowers, I may as well cut them down to get the most use out of them. So I'm just bringing in my scissors here so that I can cut these down, and you're not going to see the rest of that from underneath, so like I say, I may as well use it. Some of the leaves kind of overhang each other, so I am just cutting them down so they get a little bit more of a traditional leaf shape. And I thought that I would add one more kind of here on the right hand side, but I decided that I didn't really like it, so I decided to leave that off. I can now add some liquid glue onto the back of these pieces, and I'm not adding the glue all the way to the tips of the leaves because I do like to go back in and just kind of lift them up a little bit to add a little bit of dimension. I am adding the flowers on flat as well, but because I kind of folded up those petals a little bit, the card still does look quite dimensional even though I'm adding pretty much everything on flat. So I can just finish up by adding these leaf pieces underneath those flowers. And I did struggle a little bit with this one here, I'm not going to lie, but just moving that so that you don't see any of that glue. And then I've just got this last leaf here that I can pop underneath the petals. And I really love how those colours pop against that dark card base. I have then stamped and heat embossed a sentiment from the new Enchanted Roses stamp set, and I have stamped that onto some Crafty Necessities jet black cardstock so that it matches my card base. I can then add some instant dimension foam tape onto the back of that, remove the backings off of that foam tape with some tweezers, and then I can adhere that down onto the card. And I'm just using my T-square ruler here just to try and line that up as straight as possible. And so that is the card finished for today. I decided not to add any embellishments because there is a lot of shimmer and shine from that paste, and I really love adding that extra kind of splatter with that stenciling as well. Really great way to use that Shimmer Relief Paste. Links to the products that I used will be listed in the description bar on YouTube and also over on the Altenew blog. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day.
Hey there, Lydia here. I really do hope that you've just enjoyed the video. If so, please subscribe to the Altenew YouTube channel. Also, turn on the notification bell so you can get your daily dose of crafty techniques and tutorials just like this. Thank you so much for watching. Bye-bye.